Good morning. I'm President Matthew Holland. I want to extend a warm welcome to our students, staff, faculty, community leaders in business and government, members of the press, Senator Hatch, our distinguished panelists this morning. Welcome to the second annual Economic Forum. Let me just say a word about this forum before I introduce Senator Hatch, who will in turn introduce our guest panelists and get the morning started. Here at Utah Valley University, we seek to be an inclusive institution, exposing our students to a range of different viewpoints and perspectives, and we are happy to host this event to hear from these different speakers their ideas about this issue of growing the economy in the right way. We seek to do that, the pursuit of those ideas in a serious fashion, learning from people who have expertise, whether that's academic expertise or practical expertise. And this morning we have a special opportunity to hear from those with practical expertise in these matters. And this speaks to the third component of our university mission, that we're an engaged institution. We interact with people who are wrestling with important issues in the practical world around them. And this is a moment of engaged learning in that sense. So we're grateful for Senator Hatch, for these very busy panelists who are here. These are nationally recognized figures who have taken a significant amount of time out of their schedule to fly in to be with us today, to break from important duties at a critical time to help us think through these problems and issues together. So my heartfelt thanks to their willingness to come and share the morning today. Really, the vision and leadership behind this economic forum leads to one path. That's the path of Senator Orrin Hatch's door. He's the one that saw the opportunity to do something like this and had the vision and the connections to bring such illustrious folks together to discuss these issues. We're grateful, Senator Hatch, for doing this and for your continual support of the university. In 1976, Orrin Hatch ignored a mountain of conventional wisdom when he decided to run against Senator Frank Moss, a powerful incumbent, at a time when Utah was a very blue state. The novice Republican underdog campaigned tirelessly across Utah and won an endorsement from then Governor Ronald Reagan, eventually beating Moss with 54% of the vote. As a statesman, Hatch is perhaps best known for his chairmanship of the Judiciary Committee, a position which he served from 1995 to 2001, and again from 2003 to 2005. Still the senior Republican on the committee, he has participated in the confirmation hearings of 8 of the 9 current Supreme Court justices and countless federal judges. He's also been chairman of the Labor and Human Resources Committee, now called the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee, serving from 1981 to 1987. Among his many accomplishments on this committee, Hatch has helped create the modern industries of generic drugs and nutritional supplements. He is the second-ranking Republican on the Senate Committee on Finance, where he has been a leading advocate for policies to encourage savings and investment. His priorities as senator are to give taxpayers back more of what they earn, work for a country in which children can be safe, defend constitutional rights, cut down on the size of government, empower the military, and embody time-honored principles of integrity, honesty, and candor. He is the 5th most senior member of the U.S. Senate and the most senior Republican. I introduce to you Senator Orrin Hatch.
Well, I'm really happy to be with all of you here today, and I certainly want to express my appreciation for this wonderful president of this university. He's a terrific human being, a wonderful friend, and does a terrific job. So welcome to the second annual Utah Economic Forum, The Right to Grow the Economy. Now, it's a real pleasure to be here with you all today and sharing the stage with some truly remarkable business and opinion leaders who are working in the trenches every day, addressing the issues that are facing our people across America. I want to express my gratitude to our host, Utah Valley University, and to our special guests, each of whom we will hear from in a few minutes. With this forum, we hope to provide the opportunity for concerned Utahns to have a serious discussion about some of the most important issues affecting our future as a nation. Problems that we must solve as a people if we want our children and grandchildren to have a chance of inheriting the kind of life and country that we hope we can leave to them or that we inherited. Our guests here today are very knowledgeable and credible authorities on all of these issues, and I know we can each learn a great deal from listening to their remarks. I hope to also learn from you as we take questions and hear concerns from the audience. One of my personal goals this morning is to cut through the rhetoric and discuss the real substance of these vital questions that concern you. During the past several months, our nation has seen record deficit spending, more taxes, and more bureaucratic control out of Washington. Last week, our unemployment rate went to 9.6%, with underemployment much higher at well over 18%, around 18.4%. That means people who have had to take part-time jobs or just have given up. That's the real figure that bothers me more than anything else. We've been given $1 trillion so-called stimulus package that failed to live up to the administration's promise that it would work, quote, immediately, unquote, and keep our unemployment under 8%. The only jobs that have been saved or created, it seems to me, or at least the vast majority of them, are government jobs. Then we had a $2.6 trillion health care spending bill jammed through that raises taxes and does absolutely nothing about health care spending, all while adding another unaffordable entitlement that we cannot afford on the backs of our American families. And let's not forget the financial regulation bill that puts a crimp on lending by small businesses or lending to small businesses. This is hardly the summer of recovery that the administration promised. And as you can see, I'm extremely concerned with the direction that our country is headed. And I know that many of you here share my frustrations as well. I've received literally thousands of emails, phone calls, and letters from Utahns who are extremely concerned about our nation's fiscal future and the legacy that it's leaving behind to our children and grandchildren. That's why I'm so pleased to provide this opportunity today to hear from top business leaders and provide a chance for all of you to ask questions and to help us work on solutions together. First, Mr. Donald A. Dan Danner, sitting in the middle over here, will address us. Dan is the president and CEO of the National Federation of Independent Business, the NFIB, the nation's leading small business advocacy organization. Mr. Danner has served as Vice President for Federal Relations at George Mason University and as the Chief of Staff to the U.S. Secretary of Commerce and as Deputy Director and Special Assistant to the President in the White House Office of Public Liaison. While leading NFIB, Mr. Danner has been very active in representing the increased challenges and frustrations business owners are facing in today's economic environment. Today, he will be discussing health care reform and the impact Obamacare is having on keeping America's small businesses healthy and strong. Following Mr. Danner, we will have the opportunity to hear from Dr. Ed Catmull, who is president and co-founder of Pixar Animation Studios and president of Walt Disney Animation Studios. Dr. Catmull has been honored with at least, that's all I know about, 5 Academy Awards, including the Gordon E. Sawyer Award for his lifetime of technical contributions and leadership in the field of computer graphics for the motion picture industry. Dr. Catmull will be addressing the need for strong intellectual property protections and the need to open new international markets so American companies can sell their goods to consumers around the world. Currently, the intellectual property or IP industry makes up the largest segment of our economy. And finally, the Honorable David M. Walker will be speaking on entitlement reform, something that is a burgeoning, most important issue for all of us in this country today, and the need to curtail spending and forego additional borrowing from foreign creditors. Mr. Walker is the president and CEO of the Peter G. Peterson Foundation, a foundation working to promote federal financial responsibility and accountability today in order to create more opportunity tomorrow. Prior to assuming this position, Mr. Walker served as the 7th Comptroller General of the United States. Get that? The 7th Comptroller General of the United States of America, and head of the U.S. Government Accountability Office, often referred to as the GAO. He's been there for almost 10 years. I've watched him in action. I have nothing but admiration for him. This was one of the 3 presidential appointments he received by different presidents from both major political parties during his 15 years of federal service. After his presentation, I will take just a few minutes to address you. So let's begin with Mr. Dan Danner, this great small business leader, and let's go from there. Mr. Danner.
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate being here. I appreciate Senator Hatch's interest in small business, not just in health care, but in taxes. And I know in the debate going forward, as a key member of the Senate Finance Committee, he's going to have a lot to say about both those issues, health care and taxes. Let me just say 1 minute about who NFIB is, for those of you who don't know. We represent small business. We have 350,000 individual small business owners across the country who are members of NFIB. And our mission is to fight for the right of them to own and operate and grow their small business. And hopefully to fight for the rights of the next generation to be able to have the same opportunities to start and grow a business that we've had today. The impact of healthcare, the healthcare legislation on small business, we believe, in a word, will be bad, and in fact, very bad. And the main reason is it doesn't address the number one concern of small businesses, and that's cost. The reason most small businesses who don't provide health care is not that they don't want to, but they can't afford it. It's all about cost. In a small business, unlike a large business, in fact, you are very close to most of your employees. You not only know their names, you probably know their spouses' names, their kids' names, and maybe half of them are related. So it's not that you don't want to provide health care, it's that you can't afford it. And we believe that the legislation that passed doesn't really adequately address that issue. Even the Congressional Budget Office has consistently said the legislation will cause premiums for small business owners to go up, not down. It adds new taxes, regulations, and new mandates, all of which, in our opinion, are going to make it harder, not easier, for small businesses to find and afford health care. It does have a small business subsidy, and this is thrown out by many that say, well, this will fix all the problems of small business. We had a subsidy in this legislation. In our opinion, it's not only way too small, and it's way too complicated. And let me give you one example. A company that has 17 employees and an average wage of $38,000, which is not either a big or rich company, gets zero in terms of help for their employees under the subsidy in this bill. So it's not a subsidy that's going to help a lot of small businesses, in our opinion, and what is there phases out in 2 years. So it's really only very short term. The final result, in our opinion, will be that many small businesses will choose to drop coverage because paying the penalty is cheaper than trying to get coverage in the market going forward. What are some of the other specifics? First, in terms of cost, there is, as I mentioned, fairly universal agreement that the cost for small business premiums will go up and not down as a result of this legislation. And just one example, the bill included a tax on fully insured health care plans. And that's the kind of plans that most small businesses would buy. If you're a large corporation, you're likely self-insured, which means that you pay your own losses. You provide essentially your own insurance coverage. If you're small, you can't afford to take that risk, so you buy fully insured plans. The legislation included a tax on fully insured plans, not on the larger self-insured plans, that starts at $8 billion in 2014. It goes to $14 billion in 2019, and the estimates are that that tax alone will add $500 to the cost of a family plan under this legislation. Next, things like in the legislation, like caps on yearly or lifetime damages. They may be a good idea, and I think that's a valid debate to have. But certainly for a small business, they immediately and directly add cost. Because unlike a large business, you don't have the ability to spread out the risk. So if you have 6 employees and someone exceeds the lifetime or the yearly cap, you pay the price and your premiums are almost immediately going to spike. So those are issues that have, in our opinion, a disproportionate impact on small business. Next, the regulations and paperwork, and some estimate that the law has already triggered the creation of 160 new boards and commissions in Washington to deal with implementing this health care law. By the end of July, Washington will have already created 3,800 new pages of regulations. And this is just the beginning. And let me mention one that is particularly onerous, in our opinion, to small businesses, and that's the so-called 1099 IRS reporting requirement that would say to every small business, you have to file a separate form to the IRS for any business-to-business transaction over $600. So figure it out. That doesn't take very much. It's not a large piece of equipment. Anything over $600. For some small businesses, that could be in the hundreds of new forms that you're required to submit to the IRS. And interestingly, it had nothing to do with health care. It's a $19 billion money grab to help pay for some of the other things in the bill. We think it needs to be repealed. I know Senator Hatch supports that, and we think the sooner the better. And the shame is, we think in this bill that there are other things that we could do incrementally and quickly that would not have the kind of cost increases and would be effective and would help small business. And again, I know Senator Hatch has supported a number of these, but just to mention a few, we absolutely should move today on liability reform. We need our health care dollars to go to purchasing coverage, not protecting against lawsuits. That just doesn't make sense, and it's a terrible waste. We need to give small business and individuals tax parity. So if you buy a health care plan today, those premiums should be tax deductible. They're not to you as an individual. They are if you receive your health care through a large company. In our opinion, that's just not right. We need to look at national pools to help spread the risk. Size does matter. Numbers do matter. Spreading the risk matters. And we should consider more innovative things like allowing small business owners to provide their employees vouchers in pre-tax dollars so that they could take that and purchase their own health care. And the employer would get the tax deduction. So there are things we can do. Let me end with one additional but very big issue that we have as an organization with the health care legislation. And that is, we strongly believe that the individual mandate in this bill is an unconstitutional assault on your personal freedoms. If the government can mandate to you that you have to purchase health care just because you exist, what can they mandate next? Tell you got to join a health care club because that's good for your health? Tell you have to eat certain foods because that's good to your health? Where does the government intervention in your life stop? So we as an organization have joined a lawsuit with 20 attorneys general questioning the constitutionality of the individual mandate. It was filed in Pensacola, Florida on May 14th, and the federal government, the Justice Department, filed a motion to dismiss. That was originally denied by the judge, and oral arguments now on will this case go forward or not will happen on September the 14th. We believe the case will win. It will continue to go forward and ultimately to the Supreme Court, because we do believe that the individual mandate in there is unconstitutional. So let me repeat what I said to start, and that is, we believe the health care legislation that passed is bad for small business. It doesn't adequately address cost, and that's what matters. There are better solutions, and we think we need to scrap this bill, start over, and look at, on an incremental basis, how we can bring better health care at lower cost to small businesses. Let me thank Senator Hatch. I appreciate being here, and I'm honored to be here with such a distinguished other group of speakers. Thank you so much.
Good morning. Hope this water doesn't fall over. Thank you, Senator Hatch, for inviting me here, and thank you, President Holland, for hosting us. I'm pleased to spend a few minutes today talking with you about innovation and creativity and its role in driving economic growth. It's very good to be back in Utah. As some of you may know, I grew up in Salt Lake City during the 50s. And during that time, the two iconic people who became my heroes were Albert Einstein and Walt Disney. And of course, people know the impact of what Walt Disney did. They focus on the output and they focus on the art. But one thing I was aware of as a child and appreciate even more now was that the motion picture industry and animation grew out of a technical revolution. And Walt Disney was responding and reacting and participating in that technical revolution. So the first color in animation, the first sound, the first compositing of putting elements together that photographed separately, all took place under Walt's direction and pushing. And he kept pushing, and it was one of the things that made Disneyland, which is one of the iconic and important cultural events of the world, really, came out of his vision of bringing in technology and mixing that in with entertainment. People just look at the entertainment side, but from a business point of view, you have to understand it isn't just that they used it, but it was a driving engine, a driving part of the creative force that took place. And it was that combination that was exciting to me as a child. I went to the University of Utah. I was originally going to be an animator, but I came to the conclusion, I think incorrectly at the time, but that I couldn't draw well enough. And it's because I didn't actually see the path. So I went into physics at the University of Utah. And then during graduate school, they had a program there that was funded by ARPA. ARPA at that time was funding computer science research in universities around the United States. And that funding of that research actually created this industry, which has changed the world. It had a lot of foresight to it. It was administered very effectively, and I was a beneficiary of that program. And Utah was selected to focus on the area of computer graphics. So coming into the program, I now saw, it was like one of these light bulbs that went off, that here was this technical area where it was we were at this amazing frontier, and we could use it for art. And my goal at that time was to develop the technology to the point where we could do the first feature film. And at the time, as a graduate student, I thought that would take about 10 years. I was off by a factor of 2. But it became a driving force for me. I was profoundly affected by my experience at the University of Utah. It was a phenomenal environment. And I was grateful for that environment. Even at the time, I knew there was something special, and I wanted to recreate it in leaving. There's something about the openness and people coming, and you had really the technical innovation and the creativity and art and filmmaking and image processing all mixed together in this healthy mix. I ended up after that at Lucasfilm, just as they were working on the second Star Wars movie. And when I showed up there, George had hired me to bring technology into the film industry, which was fairly averse to it by that time. You know, it got started by the use of technology, but the successors of it didn't understand that. So they were just writing this thing, and it was starting to become a little deficient in the way they thought about things. George wanted to bring technology back into the industry, and so that's why I was hired. So I came and I visited the people at ILM. These people were the best in the world at doing special effects. They were very friendly, they were very open, they were very nice. And as far as they were concerned, what I was doing was completely irrelevant to what they were doing. They were engaged in making a motion picture. And that took all their focus, was to deliver on that. And I was grateful and thankful that actually George provided the protection for us to continue to do the R&D. And I even say, looking forward, there were times in which we were too protected. And at that time, I began to get this appreciation for this range of where you've got protection and where you've got full engagement, and you're off in this competitive part of the world. And there are times when you have to be at one side, and there are times when you have to be on the other, and you have to know the difference. But you have to do both, which is something that a lot of people don't understand. After 5 years there, that group was acquired, and we spun out from Lucasfilm with Steve Jobs buying us, and we formed Pixar. So this was almost 25 years ago. And again, we could make our next steps towards this long-term vision that we all had, which was to make the first feature film, which resulted ultimately in 1995 coming up with Toy Story, which changed animation, and as a result of that, actually changed the motion picture industry. Now, while all this was happening, I had friends in Silicon Valley in various companies, and there was this pattern. These companies would rise, they would do well, they were innovative, they had the best engineering, the best technology, they had access to the best customers out there, all that great knowledge. Their CEO would get the picture on the cover of Fortune magazine, and then each of those companies would do something incredibly stupid. Happened over and over again. So now we're sitting on the side, and we're in this struggling company with Pixar, but the thing I'm wondering is, what's going wrong in companies that are successful, that they do things that are so lame or so stupid? And the one thing that was very clear to me is that in all these companies, there was very little introspection. Because usually if you are successful, or if you fail for that matter, you jump to the quick and easy solution, you figure out what it is, and you move on. And usually those answers are wrong. And to figure out what actually makes you succeed or fail takes a lot of deep introspection, which very few people are willing to do. And so the question was, if we ever became successful, and the prospects were fairly slim when we started, would we fall into that same trap? So when Toy Story came out and was successful and we went public, we were scared. Would we do the same stupid thing? And it's hard because in our business, and I think this is like in a lot of businesses, when we first make a product, which in a case is a story, the story sucks. And I say this and people kind of get it, but they don't get it. Because I think when we think of an idea, then it's just a matter of doing whatever it takes to implement the idea. And that isn't the way it works. Is when we start, it isn't any good. And taking it from suck to non-suck is a lot of hard work. And you don't know if you're going to get there. But when you start, you can't judge it. This is where the protection comes in. It's like the research and the development. When we do something new, it's not done. It's not right. We don't know where it's going to end up. We have to protect it. If we protect it too long, we'll kill it. And so there comes a time when you have to engage. You have to make it happen. And usually the economic engine comes from the people who are engaged in making it happen. And sometimes, in some places, they take over. That is, because they're the economic front lines, they actually control where they're going. And that's what happened to a lot of those companies. That driving engine actually was making money now, but not thinking about the future. And they weren't protecting that part which thinks about the future, because they thought them of something other, because their job was to make the money, not think about the future. So with every film, we make it our business to be scared about what we're going to do. And in fact, with every film, we have a disaster. Something goes wrong. So we've made 11 films now, and only on one film did we not have a disaster, which is actually Toy Story 3, the one that just came out. So I was talking with Steve Jobs a little while ago, and I said, well, so far we haven't had any disaster with this film. He said, well, you better be careful. This is not a good sign. So I said, don't worry, our next 4 are disasters. That's what our job is right now. We currently have the longest continuous successful streak of films in motion picture history. We have disasters on these films, and we accept it as part of what we do. Because we think that our films aren't our only creative product. They are, it's our processes, the way we think about things, our technology, our culture. They're all our creations. They're all part of our intellectual property, not just that final thing that you see. I've spent my entire career at the intersection between art and technology. And we see these same kinds of things happen in other industries. And working with the world-class people in art and in technology, I can see that those groups are very similar to each other. That is, the organizational skills and abilities are the same. That is, technical is a creative endeavor. Because sometimes people think the technical people are more organized and the artists are the loosey-goosey things. And it's just not true. Andrew Stanton, who's directed Wall-E and Finding Nemo and is currently doing John Carter of Mars, is extremely organized, methodical, and I'd have to say the statistics between these two groups are the same. We believe that it's this confluence that drives things forward. And the phrase that we use is that technology inspires art and art challenges the technology. And of course, this isn't unique to animation. It applies in our field a lot into the special effects, but into the whole world of intellectual property. It's easy to see, I think, for people, that intellectual property is important, but it's far bigger than most people realize. Senator Hatch just mentioned this, but I want people to understand this, that the intellectual property accounts for 1/3 of the market value of all U.S. stocks. It accounts for more than 40% of the U.S. gross domestic product. It's really phenomenal. The U.S. copyright industries grew at more than twice the real growth rate for the U.S. economy as a whole. And it's really, it accounts for 40% of the U.S. Growth. The motion picture industry itself alone accounts for 2.4 million American jobs, which is about $41 billion in wages every year. People might assume this is all in California and in New York, but the reality is that it is spread out throughout the country. There are 95,000 different businesses involved, spread over the 50 states. 93% of them are small businesses that employ fewer than 10 people, and the majority are outside of New York and California. The on-location-based entertainment for film and television also takes place here in Utah. Utah has some good tax benefits for them. So Disney's cable network group, for instance, produced High School Musical here. And in 10 years, they've done something like 20 films in Utah. There have been 2 sequels filmed here in Utah. The games that follow from that are also produced here in Utah. Disney's Avalanche Group is located in Salt Lake. In fact, when they first came in, the typical thing was a large company buys a small company, they screw it up. And so it was very important for us, like when Disney acquired Pixar, that we have these walls in place so that Pixar could retain its culture. And they're trying to be very good about each of these companies to do that. Now, I say they screw that up. What it means is sometimes you're better off going to an outside company to get the work. And in fact, what happened was when they acquired Avalanche, Avalanche had to compete against the company that Pixar had a relationship with. And when they went through this thing, John and I had to make the decision. And the fact was that the other company we're working with was technically a little advanced, but the group at THX was significantly advanced in their creative content. And for John and I, there was no question. It was the creative content that mattered. And they did a great job on Toy Story 3. At Pixar, we come here, we've sent out animators to help with the program at BYU. BYU has put together, I think, the best program for training technical animators in the world. And in the last while, we've hired over 30 people out of the BYU program. Now, of course, the ability to make this kind of investment in creativity requires that we be able to recoup that investment. And it also requires that we recoup it globally. In the case of Toy Story, we just crossed the $1 billion mark. It's the first animated film to ever get that kind of ticket sales. It's now the 5th highest grossing motion picture in motion picture history. And of that, 60% comes from overseas. In fact, last year, 64% of the gross ticket sales came from overseas. But there's a problem, and that is the intellectual property rights overseas are different than they are here. There are some places where the protection is very poor, and in some cases they actually do have the laws in place, but they don't enforce them. So the result is in China and Russia, for instance, 90% of the value is lost to pirates. But it isn't just those countries, it actually happens throughout the world. It's people feeling that it's okay to just essentially steal and live off of what we did. And they do it on a variety of reasons, of calling it cultural diversity or blah, 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 but in fact it's people just trying to take money from others. And at a personal level, we work very hard to make these films. We try to make films that will make a positive contribution to world culture. And we want to engage the world fairly, and having those kind of protections is very important. I know that Senator Hatch has been very active in leading the effort to turn up the heat on these foreign nations, so they are in compliance with even their own laws, but also getting better laws in place. Because at the end, it isn't just a few companies that are at stake here. It really is an entire industry. I believe strongly and firmly that we have to protect our intellectual property rights. They're one of the things that make this nation strong, and we want to continue to do so. Thank you very much.
Senator Hatch, President Holland, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. It's an honor to be with my co-panelist. It's a pleasure to be back in Utah, my favorite place to ski. And not far from here, I was surprised and honored several years ago to win the National Public Administrator of the Year Award from BYU. And so I have a fond place in my heart for Utah. It's interesting how this panel was put together. Very thoughtfully. You have small business, which is the foundation of our economy. You have technology, innovation that is used in the entertainment business and elsewhere and projected around the world. And then you have myself, who is in the government transformation business, all of which are very important in order to keep America great and in order to make sure that our future is better than our past. And before I go through a few graphics that I want to show you to help convey a powerful message, I just want to acknowledge the role that Senator Hatch plays. I'm a political independent, and I have been since 1997. He is extremely powerful in Washington. He's very well respected. He's very effective, and he's a true gentleman. And frankly, I've had dealings with him since the 1980s when I was head of the Pension Benefit Guaranty Corporation. He chaired the Senate Labor and Human Resources Committee, and then more recently in Finance, which is an incredibly important position. On my lapel, you'll find two things that I value greatly. One is a rosette for the Sons of the American Revolution, which I'm pleased and proud to be a member, and the second is a certified public accountant pen, which I happen to be. The combination of the two means that I'm a patriot who can add. And quite frankly, we need more of them in this country. You know, the United States... The United States is not top 25 in the world in math, nor science. And it's a lot lower ranking than that in Washington. And the simple fact of the matter is there's a new four-letter word. It's called math. The numbers have to work. Let me, if I can, show you some graphics and then sum up with some comments and leave time for Q&A. The federal government has grown dramatically since our founding in 1789. In 1800, it was 2% of the U.S. economy. This year, it's 24%. On autopilot, our do-nothing status quo, spinning out of control path, it will rise to 38% of the U.S. economy by 2040 if we don't do something. Now, that does not count state and local. You count state and local, you're talking about 50% of the United States economy. In the last 9.5 years, the debt of the United States has more than doubled. And we have two types of debt. We have debt owed to the public, whether it's foreign or domestic, and we have debt owed to the trust funds, Social Security, Medicare, other trust funds. The government likes to just talk about the debt that we owe to the public because it's a lower number. But in reality, the real debt number is the combination of the two, and on that basis, we now have debt equal to about 92% of the U.S. economy. And even on the more conservative number, debt held by the public, 61%. In the last 40 years, the composition of the budget has changed dramatically from being dominated by defense and areas which are in the Constitution of the United States to being dominated by social insurance and other programs where, in many cases, they're very important, they're very valuable, but we have promised more than we can afford and deliver. And what is the result? That in the last 40 years, Congress has gone from being able to decide how 62% of the budget would be spent every year to 38, going down to 18 by 2040, unless we change course. And guess what? The so-called discretionary spending, 38% this year, going down to 18, includes every express and enumerated responsibility envisioned by the Founding Fathers under the Constitution of the United States. It also includes investments in our future and investments in young people. It includes research and development, critical infrastructure, education and innovation, etc. So what is happening for you young people, and I'm glad to see young people here, your future is being mortgaged. Relative investments in your future are being reduced at a time when we face increasing competition in an increasingly interconnected and competitive global marketplace. In the South, where I'm from, that's called a triple whammy, and that's not good. We need to wake up, recognize reality, and start changing our course. If you look at the official financial statements of the United States government as of September 30, 2009, you'll find that the total liabilities and unfunded promises for the United States federal government have more than tripled in 9 years, from $20 trillion to $62 trillion, of which $38 trillion is unfunded Medicare obligations, $7.7 trillion for Social Security. Now, those are numbers based upon 75-year numbers in the official financial statements. I can make them bigger if you want to go to perpetuity, which is the end of time. The problem is nobody knows when the end of time is. And if you believe in the Mayan calendar, it may be 2012, and, let's all party and don't worry about it, right? But the fact of the matter is that we are out of control. Now, until the Great Depression, this country ran surpluses more than deficits. And frankly, until the last 30 years, we didn't run deficits unless we had a war, a recession, a depression, or a major national emergency. But within the last 30 years, we've become addicted to conspicuous consumption and debt, and we've become overly reliant on foreign lenders. And there's only one time in the history of the United States, in recent history, that we've had debt held by the public over 60% of the economy, and that was World War II. But we were betting the ranch, not just for the United States, but for the free world, and we won that bet. And then we took steps to grow the economy, to promote fiscal responsibility, and brought down the debt burdens, as you can see. But now, for the second time in the history of the United States, we're past that 60% point. We're now at 61 and growing rapidly. And again, as I said, that didn't count the debt that we owe to the trust funds. And the truth is, if you look at apples and apples comparisons of us versus other European nations, and you count total public debt, federal, state, local, we are already worse than Spain. We're worse than Portugal. We're worse than Ireland. We're worse than the UK. We're within 10 years of being where Greece is now. Oh, but footnote, don't forget those several $1 trillion that we owe Social Security and Medicare. If you add that, we're within 3 years of where Greece is today. We're not Greece, but we're not exempt from the laws of prudent finance. And Greece was once the most powerful, advanced, and respected civilization on earth that controlled most of the known world. Another challenge that we have is that we don't save enough. And running big deficits and not saving enough means that you have to go to foreign lenders, China, Japan, all exporting nations and others, in order to finance our deficits and debt. And that's okay in the short term, but it is not in our long-term economic, foreign policy, national security, or even domestic tranquility interest, because that means more and more of interest payments go overseas to benefit others rather than ourselves. This country is being mortgaged, and increasingly that mortgage is held by foreign lenders who may or may not share our same priorities. You must pay attention to your foreign bankers. They have more leverage on you. You have less leverage on them. That's the basic truth. And this is where we're headed on debt to GDP, on our current path. And what about the composition? If we tax at historical levels, 18.3% of GDP, which is the average for the last 40 years, if we don't reform Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, if we don't end up rebaselining government, separating the wheat from the chaff between what works and what doesn't work, and we continue to charge the national credit card and pay interest on that debt, this is what our future looks like. By 2040, the only thing the United States federal government will be able to do on historical revenue levels is pay interest on the mounting and massive federal debt. This does not compute. Social Security ran surpluses for years, but now it started to run deficits. Yes, there's a trust fund, but it doesn't mean the same thing as Webster's dictionary, because this trust fund you can't trust and it's not funded. It holds more government debt. Now which the government doesn't even want to count as a liability. Don't get me wrong. Social Security is an important program. It's the most popular program in the federal government. It's one of the most successful programs in the federal government. It doesn't face an immediate crisis. It is not our biggest problem, but it has a problem. and it represents our greatest opportunity to make progress. And we should reform Social Security in 2011 to make it solvent, sustainable, secure, and more savings-oriented. And I'm more than happy to answer questions about how to do that. We have an opportunity to exceed the expectation of every generation of Americans, because seniors believe that they're going to be cut dramatically, which is not true. Young people don't believe they're going to get anything, which is not true. That means that you have an opportunity to restructure the program where everybody gets not more than they've been promised, but more than they think they're going to get. I call that a win. So we need some leadership so that we can get some points on the board, show our foreign lenders that we're serious about putting our financial house in order, show the American people that we can actually get something done, and then be able to gain some confidence and momentum to be able to do some things that are going to be a lot tougher, such as comprehensive tax reform, such as real health care reform that will reduce health care costs, that will reduce the rate of increase in health care costs, that will stabilize the percentage of health care as a percentage of our economy, that will provide universal coverage for appropriate, affordable, and sustainable levels of health care, because right now we've promised way more than we can deliver on. You just haven't been told it. When you promise way more than you can deliver on, that's a false promise. You need to reconcile that, and the sooner the better to reconcile it. We're also going to have to reimpose tough statutory budget controls, pay-as-you-go rules that don't have trillions of dollars of loopholes in them. We're going to have caps on discretionary spending and also do something about mandatory spending. We're also going to need a constitutional amendment on how much debt as a percentage of our economy we can have. We don't have a credit card limit that's expressed in the Constitution. Some countries do. We need one. We have a credit card limit. In reality, the Chinese just haven't told us what it is yet. And we don't want to find out through the market, because if we do, we will have something much worse than a recession. In summary, Washington has grown too big, promised too much, delivered too little value. We're living beyond our means. We're mortgaging our future. We're cutting relative investments in our future. We're living on borrowed time. We must wake up. We must begin to take steps to be able to put our federal financial house in order. And the two biggest parts of the community that needs to be more engaged are business and young people. Business will pay a price. All of us will pay a price if we don't start putting ourselves in a more prudent, sustainable path. Young people will pay the price and bear the burden if we do not change course. Yes, we can, no pun intended. Yes, we can make tough choices and help make sure that our future is better than our past. But the clock is ticking. Time is not working in our favor. We must remember what Einstein said, who was a very bright man. The most powerful force on earth is not nuclear energy. It is the power of compounding. And when you're an investor, the power of compounding works for you. When you're a debtor, it works against you. And when you make tough decisions, sooner rather than later, the power of compounding can work for you. But if you wait until a crisis is at our doorstep, as Washington typically does, our future will not be one that you and I will be proud of. Thank you very much. Let's do it, and let's get to Q&A.
Well, these three gentlemen have been terrific as far as I'm concerned, and they've all three told you about important areas that we need to improve on, not only improve on, but completely change. I want to thank all of our special guests today who've just addressed you for their excellent presentations and the information they're willing to share. It was very informative for me, and I hope that you were able to glean valuable information as well. But let me now spend just a few minutes with you as we close out this portion of our forum and discuss tax reform and why we so desperately need it, as the distinguished former Comptroller General said. As we delve into this complex topic, however, it is important to try to look at the big picture and see if we can determine what tax reform really means. Well, almost everyone is going to have their own ideas about how to best fix the tax system. I think there might be three things that almost everyone can agree upon. First, everyone dislikes paying taxes. Second, most everyone thinks the tax system is too complex and unfair. And finally, most everyone agrees that when it comes to taxes, Washington needs an attitude adjustment. Well, for some of you who've been to Catholic schools, you understand the disciplinarian were the nuns who carried their stick with them, their ruler, to make sure kids behave themselves. But our tax system is unfair. It reminds me of the story of the woman who inherited an obnoxious and dirty-mouthed parrot from her deceased aunt. The new owner of this bird never knew just where the parrot learned to swear like a longshoreman, but its language could embarrass a Marine drill sergeant. After a few weeks of apologizing to mortified guests, the woman decided she had had enough, and that it was time to do something about this parrot and its awful language. So first she tried the soft approach. She was extremely polite and soft-spoken to the bird. She tried to set the best example possible and attempted to create a nice atmosphere that would not set off the volatile pet. This was a complete failure, and the profanity continued at least as bad as it was before. She next decided to try a harder approach. She yelled at the parrot, she screamed at the parrot, she swore at the parrot, hoping to show the bird just how awful it was just to have to listen to this kind of language. Now this too backfired, and if anything, the parrot added an additional cuss word or two to its vocabulary. Finally, at her wit's end, the distraught owner decided to try an extreme technique that she had read about in a book on how to deal with drastic pet behavior. She placed the parrot in the freezer and set the timer for 10 minutes. When the buzzer went off, she opened the freezer door, and what she saw amazed her. The parrot had an apologized look on its face and humbly begged the woman's pardon for its bad attitude and its horrible language. The penitent pet pledged never to swear again if she would just promise to never again put him in such a terrible place. The owner agreed to not freeze the parrot again if it refrained from swearing, and it all seemed well. After getting settled back in the cage again, the parrot asked, "By the way, what did that chicken I saw in the freezer do?" Well, this is the kind of attitude adjustment we need in Washington. Now, I have a lot more to say, but I think what I'd rather do is go to the last two slides that I'd like to show. Let's go to the next one. The next one is that we have 39 out of 50 largest corporations in the world in the United States in 1980. 39. Covered the whole country. Now let's show the last one. Today, we have 16 out of the top 50 largest corporations in the United States. Now that shows that we're doing some very bad things. Now, just yesterday, the president gave what I consider to be one of the most political speeches that he's ever given. Now, I happen to like the president. He's charismatic, intelligent, I'd have to say articulate, and attractive personality. I know him well. I've had one-on-ones with him down at the White House. But yesterday, I was a little surprised at the tone in his speaking. The fact of the matter is, the president said that he's going to give business something. And what he's going to give them is something that I've been a prime sponsor of, along with Senator Baucus, who is chairman of the Finance Committee. I'm next ranking to Chuck Grassley, and will take over as Republican leader on the Finance Committee this next January. And basically, what the president said was that he's going to have a permanently installed research and development tax credit. Now, that's a terrific idea. We've been trying to do that for years. I'll tell you, Dr. Catmull would really appreciate that, and so would everybody else in this 40% of our intellectual property industry in this country. 40% of our total industry in this country, intellectual property related. Okay? He also said a second thing. He would give businesses an opportunity to deduct 100% of their equipment purchases this next year. That's a good idea, too. And I know he put those two ideas in there so that some of us who've been open to trying to help resolve these problems in a bipartisan way might help. However, to pay for it, he's going to play around with what we call the special rules, deferral rules, for our multinational corporations. As you can see, we just have a small number of them left. There's a reason for that. We have we have the highest, some say the second highest corporate tax rate in the world. It's not hard to see why some corporations are going to Ireland, who has a 12% rate compared to our 35%, and he wants to move it up to 40%. Now, if they play around with the deferral rules, what that means is this, that we're going to tax overseas profits, even though those foreign subsidiaries are overseas and need those profits to continue to do business over there when the total management of the company is here with all kinds of benefits that come from their work overseas as well as their work here. That would make us so uncompetitive that these other few remaining corporations are going to leave this country too, because they can't afford to compete with that type of lousing up of the tax situation. So if you're going to pay for it by wrecking our multinational corporations and having them go overseas, and as you can see, many of them have gone overseas because of the over-regulatory nature and the high taxation that we have in this country. Now, as much as I love those two provisions that I think are valid provisions, and the President knows that I'm open to things like this because the Schumer-Hatch Amendment allowed a payroll tax deduction if businesses would hire non-relative new employees over this next year. They would not have to pay their payroll taxes. And that has created a significant number of jobs, is what they tell me. It's a minor thing, but it was the major thing in the one bill that passed. Now, let me tell you, as much as I want a permanent research and development tax credit, I don't want to wreck corporate America that provides so many jobs for American citizens. And as much as I'd like to have a tax-deductible equipment purchase in 1 year to encourage expenditure, to encourage manufacturing, to encourage that, I don't think we can do that with taxes on the oil and gas industry. That's just another way of taxing you, because the oil and gas industry is going to raise those taxes on you, and you're going to pay higher energy costs, not only for your car, but your home and your businesses and everything else. And that's not the way, it seems to me, to bolster this economy that is now 9.6% unemployment, and the real figure in my eyes is 18.4% underemployment. People who don't even try anymore, or they have to take, part-time jobs. These are important issues. For the life of me, I can't understand the philosophy that would undermine our very ability to compete, just so they can get more money to do more taxing and more spending and more government. And that's what's happening. And that's a fair appraisal. I don't think anybody can rebut that. Make a long story short, we have got to change this country. I've admired our Comptroller General for years. He's been one of the few bright spots in Washington, one of the few people who's telling it the way it is. There's no question about it. This man knows what he's talking about. And he knows that we can reform Social Security so that our kids are not left with, they won't be left with nothing, but they'll be left with almost nothing in comparison to today. without affecting those who are on Social Security or about to come on Social Security. We've got to solve that problem. He knows how. I think I know how too. Number two, we should be reducing taxes rather than raising taxes. Because by doing that, we at least stimulate the economy at a time that we should. Number three, we've got to stop the inevitable growth of government and the overregulation of government that's costing every one of us an arm and a leg. Fact of the matter is, just a few years ago, we had 900,000 federal employees. Today, almost 2.25 million. By the way, it's said that the average wage of federal employees, if you count everything, is $80,000. It used to be that getting a federal job, you'd make a little less in the private sector because you had permanency of job, you had health care, you had stability in your life. The average wage out there in this country is somewhere around $48,000, I was last told. As you can see, government has gotten too big, it's too expensive, and it's too run by special interests. Now, Danner just said, he gave you a pretty good overview of this Obamacare bill. And he's accurate. But he mentioned, let me just mention one thing, and that is medical liability reform. You talk to any doctor who's a surgeon, general surgeon, neurologist, neurosurgeon, and they'll tell you that they always overprescribe because they want to make sure that the history they have on that patient includes every possible thing that they could cover to make sure that that patient doesn't have some rare disease or something. This is called unnecessary defensive medicine. We all want necessary defensive medicine. We want the tests done and so forth that are essential. But they'll admit, if you really get them down to admission stage, they'll admit that they do prescribe a lot more because just to protect themselves from frivolous medical liability suits. I used to be a medical liability defense lawyer. I defended doctors, hospitals, nurses, healthcare providers. And I've got to tell you, when I was doing that, a good 95% of all those cases were frivolous. And I don't think that's changed very much today either. There are some true cases where great verdicts and awards should be made. I myself saw the wrong eye taken out, the wrong leg taken off, the wrong kidney. They only have 2 of each of those. And we certainly settled those cases. But the vast majority of them were frivolous. And why were they? They were brought to get the defense costs, which ranged between $50,000 and $200,000, maybe more. Now, what insurance company wouldn't pay the defense costs rather than take a chance on a runaway jury? And in the process, we've got this burgeoning, high-cost medical liability system that is there for one reason. The personal injury lawyers are, if not the largest, certainly the second largest contributor to Democratic Party members in Congress. Now, we've got to change things like that. And we've got to get Democrats, as well as liberal Republicans who are on their side, to realize that this is something we can change. I said 25 years ago that I felt there was at least $300 billion a year in unnecessary defensive medicine. Now, that's just citing one aspect of what my friend Mr. Danner has talked about. Now, what about Ed Catmull? Aren't you proud of this man who went to the University of Utah, who just said that Brigham Young University has the best animation group in the country? My gosh. It's just a matter of time till this university has all that too, because it's growing and we've got tremendous leadership right now. But let me tell you, his industry is extremely important to this country. And he learned a lot of this right at the University of Utah, in our state. And it's made a case that not only Disney, but so many other businesses do intellectual property work in the state of Utah. It's critical to us. In a few weeks, we're going to have the Utah Technology Association annual dinner. You can't believe the brains that come to that dinner. And I usually have to get the speaker for them. And this year, we're bringing in one of the top IT and information technology people in the world. He runs Cisco. And let me tell you, you'd be shocked at how many brilliant, brilliant people we have right here in Utah. There are 3 basic Silicon Valleys in this country. Naturally, Silicon Valley down in California, and naturally one in Massachusetts, but here's the 3rd. This state really is a go-go state in many, many ways, and we want to keep it that way. So intellectual property protection, as Dr. Catmull has said, is critical to our ability to continue to provide 40% of the economy in this country in the manufacturing sector. These are very important things that they've brought to us here today. I personally am very grateful to these men. I admire each of them. They are fighters. They're trying their very best to change the country. They're going up and down the country, doing everything they possibly can. And I think, haven't we been blessed that they've come here today? Well, we're now going to turn the time over to you. I don't know, do we have there's a microphone here. Is there one over here? I guess we have just one, so if you'll get in line for that one microphone, or can we carry the microphone to people? Sharon, or should we leave it there? Let's have you get in line, and you can get in line, and we'll just try and get down that line, okay? Is there one back there, too? There's one back there, too?
Just this one here.
You what? Oh, that's the line. We'll just come up here then.
Yeah,
Okay, well, we'll turn the time over to you. I hope you'll ask some of these folks some really good questions so that we can all benefit from it. So the time's yours.
Yeah, the line will form in the back, and then you can just come up here to ask the questions.
Thank you, gentlemen, for showing up here and having an open forum. That's fairly rare, first of all. Mr. Hatch, considering the speech you gave about big business, my question has to do with that, actually. How does I see that between 2005 and 2010, your campaign has received over $6.4 million in contributions. Excuse me. Top 10 of those contributors were big pharmaceuticals, lawyers and law firms, securities investment corporations, health professionals, or as we call it, the medical industry, computers and internet, lobbyists, or as you said, special interests, the insurance industry, the real estate industry, hospitals and nursing homes, of which a friend of mine had his property eminent domain so that one could be built, health services and HMOs, or health insurance companies, with Blue Cross Blue Shield being your top overall contributor, the entertainment industry, as we well know, the oil and gas industry, which you just spoke of, and the business services industry. And as a final industry, or insult, excuse me, commercial banks, with Bear Stearns being your top financial industry contributor. My question is, at what point in your career have you actually ever represented the interests of the people and the state of Utah, considering that over 70%, and that's conservative, of your financing and lobbying comes from major out-of-state corporations and lobbyists?
Well, that's a very good question. Fact of the matter is, every one of those organizations have people right here in Utah. And the reason they support me is because I support what they are talking about. And I think if you listen to my remarks just a few minutes ago, you realize that I'm supporting people who deserve support. Now, there are also others who may not even support some of the positions that I take, who know that I'm not going to be on their side, who support me because they want honest leadership in Washington. And I wouldn't get all of that support from that broad cross-section if I was just a narrow-minded person who just stood there and mouthed off all the time rather than doing the work that has to be done. And that's what I do. Now, keep in mind, the average Senate race is now $5 or $6 million. In my case, I give a lot of that money away, too, because I've supported my colleagues, I've supported various entities around here, I've supported people within the state, I've supported the state Republican Party. So there's a lot of expense to being a leader. And it's no secret, I'm the vice chairman of the National Republican Senatorial Committee, which is the fundraising arm of the Republican Senate. And as such, I deal with people all over this country. And you'd be surprised how many people who will say to me, I don't agree with you, but I know that you're honest and I know you're doing the best you can. So here, I want to contribute to you. And I do have a lot of that, but most people contribute to me because they agree with what I'm doing. And frankly, what I'm doing, I can't name one area that you've spoken of that doesn't have some contact here in Utah and doesn't help our state, that doesn't mean jobs in our state, that doesn't help our country, that doesn't mean that they're part of, that they're part of our overall business community, that really we've got to have in a solid way if we're going to pull out of this mess that we're in. So, I mean, you can always find somebody that you don't like. There are some people I don't particularly think are people that I can support sometimes, but they'll still support me because they believe I'm honest. Yes, you're next.
Hi, my name is Joyce Mitchell. I'm a resident of Orem. I wrote Governor Herbert, and I asked him if he would use some of Governor Chris Christie's strategies. And he had someone write me back call me, actually, and tell me that that's not really necessary. We're a great state. We're doing really well. But I just heard on the radio today that we have a $28 million shortfall in our budget. So I was wondering if any of you had some ideas of how you would like to our governor to handle our budget in a better way.
Can I start first, and then we'll ask each of you to comment. I've known Gary Herbert for, I would say, 40 years. I don't know of anybody who's come to the governorship better prepared to lead our state. He knows more about state and local governments than almost anybody I know. And frankly, Gary, it has been a problem. Most states are in real dread difficulties right now. By the way, I know Governor Christie as well. There's no comparison of the two states that can be made. New Jersey's been running downhill for years and years. They're billions of dollars in debt. I have such respect for him for taking them on, and it's only a matter of time till they try to kill his political life. So I support him. I'm going to support him all the way. But if we're going to get out of these messes, I have to say Gary's a good person. Our current governor is a good person to help us to do so. I might also pay tribute to our state legislature. And I'll pay tribute to both Democrats and Republicans because I think our state legislature does a terrific job. They balanced the budget last year under am I not talking loud enough? They balanced the budget last year under very difficult circumstances, and I think they'll balance it again this year. They'll make the tough decisions, and so will Governor Herbert. I don't think you could find a better person between you and me.
If I can address it, the biggest challenge that the federal government, the state government, and the local government faces are off-balance sheet obligations. I'm looking at the unfunded obligations for pensions and retiree health care. Utah has a higher than average degree of unfunded obligations for pensions. Those aren't something that you have to deal with today because governments budget on a cash basis. But they are huge problems that are going to have to be dealt with. It's estimated right now that the states alone have $3 trillion in unfunded pension and health obligations. Most states, Utah is in better shape than most, face longer-term structural challenges like the federal government because of Medicaid cost, underfunded pension plans, unfunded retiree health plans, deferred maintenance and critical infrastructure, and education costs. Utah is in much better shape than most, but it has challenges that need to be faced, right, and we need to face them sooner rather than later.
Ed, you care to say anything? No, that's okay. I agree 100%. Dan agrees. Ed, did you have anything on that? Okay.
California's a mess, so I don't have anything to add to that. So.
I agree with that, I'll tell you. Okay, you're next.
Senator, please explain to us why you voted for the TARP, the bailouts, why you are a co-sponsor on the Food and Drugs Safety Modernization Act, and why you are proposing a balanced budget amendment when the real solution is to repeal the 16th Amendment, which is the income tax.
Well, let me just say this. Let me just say that I wish we could have repealed the 16th Amendment, but there isn't the stomach to do it, nor is there the votes to do it. With regard to, let's see, I forgot the rest of your question was, what was it?
Health Modernization Act of Health, FDA
Oh, and what about the FDA Modernization Act? Well, a lot of people don't really realize how much the FDA does. The FDA handles 25% of all consumer products in America. You might say, well, that's too regulatory. No, it isn't. Without the FDA's work, and they get very little praise for it, we wouldn't have the safe food supply. We wouldn't have the safe pharmaceuticals that we have today. And it's very, very important that food safety issues are national in nature, because, there are some unfortunate sides to that too. For instance, if California with its 35 million people decides that they're going to do an extreme food safety thing, it seems like almost every major food manufacturer or food delivery system has to comply. So there are downsides to it, but there are very, very important upsides with the FDA. And so I'm known as one who has worked very, very diligently to keep the FDA honest, to make sure that they live within certain constraints, to make sure that they do a good job on our pharmaceuticals that can be very beneficial to mankind, and that we continue to be the #1 nation in the world in protecting the safety and efficacy of the lives of our people. And that's important work. And I'm known for it. And look, back early in my service, we did the Hatch-Waxman Act, which is considered one of the most important consumer bills in history, if not the most important. That has saved consumers at least $10 billion every year since 1984. Now that was passed to make sure FDA did its job. And frankly, FDA has done a very good job under the circumstances, never given enough money to really do the job that should be done. And Utah benefits tremendously from this work as well. Utah has the largest dietary supplement industry in the country. And I'm the author of the Dietary Supplement Health and Education Act, which gave FDA, according to every commissioner of the FDA since, gave them enough power to be able to protect our citizens from deleterious substances in dietary supplements. So this is really important work, and it does take a lot of effort, a lot of knowledge, and you have to have respect to be able to do things like this. Be able to pass bills like that. That bill passed unanimously through both houses of Congress. I'd go on, but the fact is, don't ever run down the FDA to me. I think they do a terrific job in very careful monetary circumstances, and they protect the citizens of this country greatly. As far as pharmaceutical companies, there are companies that do everything right and companies that don't. The ones that don't have my support. The ones who do, I will help if I can.
I would like to first thank David Walker for coming to this event. Your website, IOUSA, the movie, is a fantastic site.
You bet. He's great.
Great information for everybody. And that leads me to my points I would like to bring up, is a chart here, a chart of the national debt that is from the USNationalDebtClock.org website. And if you look at this chart, you'll see the green arrow I have put it here is when Senator Hatch first took office in 1976. Senator Hatch, you are one of a very select group that run this government, run this country. I would like to point out another thing that was spoken last week on this website, executivegov.com. This is a U.S. government news website. This was from the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. He stated, "The national debt is the single biggest threat to national security You and your constituents in office are responsible for appropriating funds of the taxpayer, and you, along with your constituents, are guilty of misuse of taxpayer monies, of obligations to our children, and you go to work every day, you sit in that seat representing the state, and you obligate us and our children and our grandchildren to a debt that we cannot ever get out of. The third biggest debt purchaser now is the Federal Reserve Bank. The Federal Reserve is monetizing our debt by printing money. How are we ever going to get out of this? And David Walker, I'd like you to speak to this because I don't think Senator Hatch has ever addressed this problem.
Well, I address it every day back there. Well, we'll go to Mr. Walker in just a second. I appreciate your earnestness, but you apparently haven't watched what's going on, or the media doesn't help you to understand. I have a reputation of being one of the balanced budget guys. In fact, my balanced budget amendment was one of that came closest to passing of any balanced budget amendment to the Constitution. Don't lump me. Now, I know you're sincere, and I appreciate you and appreciate your sincerity. But don't lump me in a category of not trying to do my very best for the last 34 years. Fact of the matter is that I've been there for 34 years, and we have never had a fiscal conservative majority in the United States Senate. We've won battles by great presidential leadership and just good leadership, and I was part of that. Because we've always had 3 to 6 liberal Republicans, along with some other moderate to liberal Republicans who have gone with the Democrats on spending issues. I haven't been one of those. It is very lonely back there when you're trying to get spending under control. But there's a hearty bunch of us who are doing everything we possibly can to get it under control. Now, the TARP bill was brought up, and I didn't answer that, and I should answer it now. I feel badly I voted for the TARP bill, but at the time, it looked like it was October. It looked like if we didn't vote for that, we'd have had October, November, December, January, February, and possibly March before anything would have been done. We'd be in a major depression right now. Now, I don't like the bill. In retrospect, I don't think they've used it properly. I don't think it had enough protections in the bill, but at the time, that was the only thing we could do because it was the end of the session, and I do believe that as bad as it was, it did help to defer us from going into a major depression. Now, there's no question that we're still in a major recession. If I had to vote over again, I wouldn't vote for it. It's just that simple. But I voted against the stimulus program, and I voted against countless other big spending programs. So let me just make a point to you. I think you're a fair person, at least I hope you are. But I'm going to just say it toughly. Don't lump me in with the rest of those people who have been spending us blind. I'm not one of them. Okay.
First, thank you for your kind comments. Let me repeat the website again, iousathemovie.com. The reason I repeat it is because within the last 48 hours, we've added a new film that we're giving away for free called IOUSA Solutions. It updates all the data with regard to how bad our situation is, and it provides illustrative solutions dealing with budget controls, taxes, Social Security, health care, defense, and other reforms in order to try to get the discussion debate going. Last comment. Our problem is what's off the balance sheet, not what's on the balance sheet. That's right. You can't monetize our way out of our problem because monetization will result in inflation over time. And while inflation can reduce the burden associated with the current debt, which is $13.4 trillion today in total, it does not help with regard to the tens of trillions of dollars that are multiple times greater, that not only grow faster than inflation, they grow faster than the economy when the economy grows. because they are driven by demographics and healthcare costs. And therefore, you must make tough choices. We have to reimpose tough budget controls, especially with regard to spending. We need a constitutional amendment for the credit card. We need to reform Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid. We need to reform our tax system, and we've got to re-baseline the entire government because most of it is focused on the past rather than the future, and a lot of it, frankly, just doesn't generate value for money.
So our country, our government, is suffering through this great depression that I believe that we need to suffer through. And TARP bill was just another shot in the arm of heroin for us as a heroin addict. And so I understand you voted to repeal the TARP bill, and I appreciate that, even though that failed to pass. I wanted to address another part of the government spending problem that we glossed over in the slides when we looked at spending. The budget request for defense expenditures in 2011 is between $1.1 and $1.2 trillion for 2011, which makes up more than a fifth of the U.S. federal spending. We have over 700 military bases in over 130 countries around the world. At the height of the Roman Empire, they had 37. The height of the British, they had 36. And we have over 700. We spend on military nearly what the rest of the world spends combined. Do we really need bases in Japan, Germany, Spain, Greenland? What do you say to decreasing the size of our empire and bringing those soldiers and money home?
Okay, first, as Comptroller General, I had to deal a lot with defense issues. I also served as an ex officio member of the Defense Business Board for 10 years. The facts are that the amount that we're spending on defense is much smaller than it was historically, but there's huge waste in defense. We waste a lot in that we are overextended around the world. We're in too many places. We're building a lot of weapon systems that are based upon past threats rather than current and future threats. Our compensation systems are much more generous than they should be and not appropriately targeted. Our acquisition and contracting practices are fundamentally flawed and result in tens of billions in waste each year. So defense should not be exempt from the fundamental review and reexamination. It's critical that it be part of it. When I wrote the book, Come Back America, earlier this year, and the paperback comes out later this month, there is a chapter on defense, just like there is Social Security and health care and taxes. It's got to be on the table because we've overextended ourselves, and we're going to have to refocus on real threats rather than past and theoretical threats.
But you'll notice he said real threats. And we do have some real threats out there, and we can't ignore them.
Hi. I apologize. I don't have an angry, pointed question for anybody. I just wanted to know, I wanted to direct this primarily to Dr. Catmull. What can the state of Utah, and then also specifically Utah Valley University, do to become a leader in innovation and specifically in film? What can we do to leverage these resources? You point out the University of Utah and BYU. What more can we be doing to really attract that industry and bring digital media more fully here and take advantage of the innovative economy? Thank you.
If you look at most successful cultures, then it's usually because you have a lot of things going on. So in Silicon Valley, there was Stanford University and Hewlett-Packard. A number of things came together in a venture capital environment. And out of that, you had something that happened. At the University of Utah, they had a starting program there which got things going here, and then frankly kind of petered out a bit for a while because there wasn't enough of of a major infrastructure. We had Evanston Sutherland here, but there weren't enough things going on. And so recently, I know at the U, it was to try to get a number of different pillars of excellence. And that's why I look at each one of these, is you want to have a few pillars of excellence. Like this program at the Y is a pillar. You produce a lot of students, and the fact is a lot of the students are going out of state. But if you have that, you've got people coming in making films, you've got the film festival here, you've got your independent filmmakers, you've got the game industry. You really want to support several of them, and you have to think of having at least 3 strengths or more in order to get a critical mass going. I know that's kind of a nebulous thing, but you can't think about the one specific thing that's going to be the big win that's going to bring everybody in. You've got to win in several different areas. So you're off to a good start, but there is more work to do, and that's probably what your question is. But it has to do with attracting the game companies in and getting even more production in this state and having things come around the film festivals so that you have jobs actually end up being here rather than moving out of state.
I have a kind of a general question. A few of you mentioned that the people need to get involved in overturning a lot of the corruption in the government. I'm curious on what your guys, because as for me, I don't know much about it at all, and I would like to know what I can do or the general public can do besides like having tea parties and stuff, but to actually make a difference. What are some of your guys' ideas on getting the people involved and making this country better?
Want me to start? Well, let me start. I've met with them, quite a few of the Tea Party leaders, and I really respect them. And one of the suggestions I had was made by one of the leaders who's here today, and frankly by a number of the leaders who are here today. He said, Senator, why don't you hold more town hall meetings? And since that meeting, I've had 6 major town hall meetings. Now, it used to be the advantage of a town hall meeting is you would notify the community, they'd know you were in town, you cared, and then if we got 50 people out, it would be it'd be a good town hall meeting. I've held 2 tele-town hall meetings this is all since April, that touched thousands of people as well. Well, my town hall meetings have averaged 500 to 700 people. Mad as hell. and I understand that. And I've stood there for at least 3 hours in every one of them and answered questions. And, a lot of them are very mad at Senator Bennett, but I made it very clear I'm not Bob Bennett. I like Bob. I thought that he deserved re-election. But the fact of the matter is I'm a different person. And we answered the questions. I think basically most people were pretty pleased that I spent the time with them. And I didn't take a lot of crap either. In other words, when I thought people were out of line, I told them so. And occasionally there was somebody who was out of line, but it was still, I treated them with respect even in spite of that. But I've got to tell you, people are mad. And most of the Tea Party people I've met and most of those who come to those town hall meetings are just angry. Now, there's some you can't deal with them. They won't listen to anything you say. You're part of them back there in Washington, which is not true, other than from a physical standpoint. And they won't listen to anything you say. But the vast majority of them are sincere, dedicated American citizens who see our country going down the drain and who see what David Walker is saying happening. Well, I see it every day there. And we've never had a fiscal conservative majority to really stop it. We stop a lot of things, but we've never really had that type of a vote, even though some of us have stood up year after year after year. So that's something I think needs to be said, and I appreciate the sincerity of people, and I appreciate the tough questions too. But let me tell you, there are a hearty band of us back there who really do stand up on these issues, and without us, it'd be even worse. Go ahead.
Let me, I don't really think it's that complicated. One, you're here today, and I applaud all of you for that, but it's the simple stuff. Are you registered? Do you vote? Do you encourage other people to vote? Do you make phone calls? Do you write letters? Do you take Do you participate in people's campaigns who you agree with? Have you ever made a contribution to anybody's campaign at any level, at the city level, at the state level, at the federal level? You know, one of the things that I heard when I go out and talk to our people around the time of the last election is, you know, it doesn't really matter. Does my vote matter? I'm just one person. You know, I think what we find out is it does matter. Every one of you here matters. Your vote, your participation, your writing letters, making phone calls, all of that matters. In my opinion, we didn't get in the situation we're in today because we all did too much. We got in a situation today because all of us didn't do enough. So if we're going to change it, you know, it is not rocket science. It's not as hard as making movies. But we all have to do something, and we all have to believe that individually what I do matters. And together, it matters a heck of a lot. We just need to do it.
I would say, first, I commend Senator Hatch and any member, elected member, who holds town halls regularly. I think that's critically important. They can be difficult. I participate in town halls for both Democrats, Republicans, as well as independents, in getting the facts to try to help stimulate a constructive, civil dialogue about tough issues. We need to do more of that. Secondly, I commend all of you for being here, but you have to keep in mind this. The first three words in the Constitution are the most important and the most powerful, and they are "we the people." We the people. We the people are responsible and accountable for what does or does not happen in Washington, in state capitals, and in city halls. These things happen because we allowed them to happen. And it is absolutely critically important that everybody, of all ages, all ideologies, all political spectrums, recognize that the future of this country is threatened. That our future position in the world, our future standard of living at home is threatened. And that you need to figure out how best you can make a difference. But, you know, it starts with one, but it needs to be more than that. I'm going to give you two websites just to check out. pgpf.org, which is our foundation, and nolabels.org, which is a new one that will be announced in December.
Okay. You're next.
So my question is kind of pretty much for everybody that's up there, since you are experts in your field, you're expert in business, also experts in business. My frustration has been that, like Senator Hatch mentioned, we need to give the tax breaks to the most wealthy. That's been tried in the past, hasn't worked. Corporate, 35% tax rate for corporations goes up to 40%. My cousin's a corporate lawyer, and so I asked her about that. I said, that's crazy. Why are we doing that? But there are so many loopholes in the tax system that we have currently that she said that you can adjust what the government sees, and it's rare that you pay that tax. And so I'm curious, and then I'm in the medical profession, and I thought that the lawsuit, tort reform, all of that was going to make a difference. But if you look at the studies that have come out, the states that have done tort reform, there's no difference. So something inherently is wrong with that thought. I've practiced defensive medicine. I've done all of that. It's wrong. It wastes money. Just ask your question. But from all of your perspectives, how do we actually come up with something that works?
I'll start. First, tax preferences, or are known tax expenditures. Last year, the federal government spent $3.5 trillion. but it forego $1 trillion in revenues because of deductions, exemptions, credits, exclusions that end up resulting in less revenues. There's absolutely no question in my mind that we need to streamline, simplify, broaden the base of taxation so decisions are made more based on economics so that we can keep rates as low as possible. Secondly, there's absolutely no question that we are not competitive with regard to our corporate tax system. We need to dramatically reduce corporate tax rates. That's who creates jobs in this country. Government doesn't create, jobs in this country that end up growing the economy, all right? But on the healthcare issue, the true cost of defensive medicine from most studies that I've seen are not the jury awards and things of that nature, although my personal view is we should have special courts for healthcare like we do bankruptcy. We should not have jury trials. I think that's very important. Secondly, the true costs are defensive medicine, and I think the way you deal with that is move to more evidence-based approaches, where those evidence-based approaches not only can help make sure that the right thing is done, but they provide a safe harbor against malpractice if you follow them.
But the problem is those evidence-based, what you're talking about, that was what people were calling the death panels.
Yeah, which was outrageous, quite frankly, in my view.
So that's my frustration, is the misinformation that gets sent out there. People buy it hook, line, and sinker. My question is for everybody here is you read something, you hear something, you fact check it, you figure it out, you decide what's right for you, what's going to be, who represents what is best for you and the country.
Well, last thing, you understand, evidence-based medicine, ultimately the decisions are going to end up being made by physicians, but they're going to be based upon proven practices. I mean, you're not going to have somebody back in Washington making these decisions.
It's a study. There are studies that are done that will guide our practice, that science is telling us works. That's why our country has the worst medical, the way we practice medicine in the United States is ineffective.
Well, let me just say this. Let me just say this. Some of your concerns are very valid. I have to say that my experience is that, and it's very similar to our Comptroller General's experience, and that is that a lot of the cases were frivolous and cost an arm and a leg to defend. And they were brought to get the defense costs. You can make a pretty good living as an attorney if you can get $50,000 out of every case. But what if you get $200,000? Because that's what the defense costs are going to be. We could go into that for quite a bit, but let me tell you something. I've been chairman of the Labor and Human Resources Committee. During my chairmanship, during the Reagan years, we did keep some things under control. But even then, we didn't have a fiscal conservative majority. Chairman of the Judiciary Committee. Most people, I think, would admit that was a pretty successful chairmanship. Now, I would like, if we can get in the majority, to become chairman of the Finance Committee. Now, if I become chairman of the Finance Committee, and I'm reelected in 2012, I guarantee you that I will break my back to do exactly what this wonderful man is telling us to do, what these wonderful men are telling us to do, whether it means reelection or not. We have got to change our tax code. We have got to change the incentives in our society. We have got to get spending under control. We have got to make our systems work better. We have got to curtail the almighty federal government from dominating every aspect of our lives. And we can go on and on. Well, I'll be in a position, hopefully, if we can get more like-minded people there, which we've never had a majority of, I'm hopeful that we can do some of the things that every one of you are concerned about, and we will, if I have my way.
We're just at the last few minutes now, so this will be our last question, and we just ask that it be brief.
Senator Hatch, my name is Larry Sorensen. I've met you on several occasions, and you have been, from the things I've heard, I think people need to know the things you have done back there. You may remember I'm the one who proposed using NASA to model the Toyotas to solve the failure problems that are not just for those cars, but for all cars. It's happening right now. You took that, you ran with it, it was announced. I haven't heard anything else, but I really appreciate your effort.
Thank you.
Second, JJ has been a big help. I've proposed a new way to develop the Gulf of Mexico. My background is oil. I know we're short on time, but there are ways to prevent whatever happened, and we need the energy. Dan Danner, I want to thank your organization. You awarded my son one of the top 5 young entrepreneurs in the United States in 2008 from here in Utah. We got run out of California because of my son's business. A young man working under 18, can't have all kinds of things, can't work out of the house, can't do anything. Broke my heart. We had to leave after 20 years. We came here, and we've been welcomed, and I'm thankful for that. My last piece, we've got to do something about the economy. That's what this is about. We cannot cut costs, and we cannot sit and look at all these little, play the shell and the pea games. We have to put the tax rules, which has been talked about. We have to have our regulations, and we have to have a top-down proposal to re-energize our country in the form of getting energy out of the ground, making us energy independent, and second, to re-energize and to re-industrialize our country. It is ridiculous. We make the camouflage coatings for the Marine Corps that they use on the Humvees that you can't see at night. We do some cool stuff. They have trouble finding people that make underwear, that do shoes, that build uniforms, buy flags without going other places. I don't even want to mention the other places. We can do it. And I have a proposal that I've put together, I've talked to Melanie about. I'm hoping I get a few minutes of your time after this so that I can discuss it with you. But we've got to do something. I'm hearing people putting in format that this can work. We can work together. But we have to have a solid plan, latch onto it, and provide the ways that people can have jobs. Okay.
Well,
my question to you is this. Would you give me a couple minutes after this just so I can chat with you about that? We're out of time. I can't go any further.
okay, well, thank you very much. We are out of time. We'll hold some more town meetings down here where those of you who are really upset with me will be able to ask every question you want, and at least for 3 hours. Let me just say this. Let's see if the panelists here care to make any final remarks. We'll start with Dr. Catmull and come across, and I'll finish it up. We meet with everybody we can. Don't worry about that. The answer is yes, if we can. Now, you know, I can't hear you, so. The answer is yes, we meet with our constituents. I think our office is known for its constituent service. And we've made it very clear, I don't want a political office. I want people serving people, whether they're Democrats, Independents, or Republicans, or whatever. And I think everybody who's worked with us knows that we do that. So we'll certainly try, no question. Dr. Catmull.
I thought I had a tough job. Actually, I've in the job I found that people are pulling in different directions, and the thing I have learned is that if any one side wins, then we all lose, and it's that pull which makes us healthy.
I just want to say again, thanks to all of you for being here, and thanks to the university for hosting the event. Thanks to Senator Hatch. Because you're here means to me that we have the ability to solve these kinds of problems. It's the people who aren't here that we all need to get to and get them engaged and involved and paying attention. So thanks to all of you for being here.
Thanks for coming, and just to reinforce, we the people, we are responsible and accountable for what does or does not happen. It's good that we had several hundred of you here. It's great that town hall meetings are taking place here in Utah. We need to magnify the numbers. Young people get engaged. Business get engaged. The future of the country and our families is at stake. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Well, I want to personally thank Dr. Catmull, Dan Danner, and David here for taking time out of what I know are really terrifically busy schedules and coming out and meeting with us at this great university. And I want to thank each and every one of you for being here. It's meant a lot to me personally. We want to continue this program because it's a way of bringing some of the leading minds in this country to us, where you can ask them questions and associate with them. And I just want to close by saying these are three very great gentlemen, and they're people I respect. I work very hard in the intellectual property area for Dr. Catmull and others, and not just the movie business, but IT businesses and all of the high technology businesses of this country. We work very closely with Dan Danner on all small business matters, because Utah is a small business state, and we've got great businesses here and great people running them. And then our former Comptroller General, my gosh, I've always admired him and loved him for the stands that he's taken, the difficult stands he's had to stand up for, and for his just general intelligence that on these issues that mean so much to us. Last but not least, thanks to this great university, for President Holland and others who have made this possible. And thanks to all of you for being here. It means a lot to me. And although we haven't been able to answer all your questions, we'll get some more town hall meetings down here, probably after the Congress is over before the election, and then in November and December, hopefully. And where you can ask all the questions you'd care to ask, and we'll try and answer them for you. We live in the greatest state in this union. And I think we have the greatest people of any state in the union. And that's saying something, because every state has its pluses that we should pay tribute to. But thank God to all of you, and God bless each one of you. And with that, we'll end this discussion. Thanks so much.
President Holland would like to express his deep gratitude to all of you for coming, to the senator, to the guests. This has also been sponsored by the Center for the Study of Ethics, by the Woodbury School of Business, and also by the College of Technology and Computing. They've furnished a buffet for you that they'd like you to share outside, and you'll have a chance to visit with all of our guests except Dr. Catmull, who has a plane that's leaving quite shortly. So we hope that you'll have a chance to visit with them. When you leave the parking lot, tell them that you've been at the Orrin Hatch Economic Conference and you won't be charged. Once again, thank you so much for coming to our campus and joining with us in this important discussion about the economy.